Today I've got a special guest. She just woke up and I wanted to spend some time with her. It's my daughter Milligan. Now, I've had to do some adjustments here. You can see a little bit how it actually works here. I've just got this curtain. But this way I can keep track of her, but remove my coffee while I'm doing this here. Now, first of all, let me do a little administrative stuff. I'm going to, I'm never really sure how I should publicize that I'm streaming. Probably I should update the schedule because today I'm having to broadcast a little early because I've got I have 2 meetings that I'll be doing starting at 11:30. So I wanted to have plenty of time to actually do my little talking here. So I'm gonna send out, if I quote this, my daughter and I are streaming now. All right. So today, I haven't really prepared the little show notes in Markdown, which will be fine. Sorry, I can't. If I come over here, I can look directly at the camera. But then, the baby lost her toy. Let's figure that out. Where did it go? Better go get it. Okay, so sorry about I can't stare at the camera. That's going to be kind of weird, but that's okay. So today I want to go over 3 things. We'll see if I get into them. One, there's this phrase digital transformation, and I wanted to go over what I mean when I say that and what I think it should mean to you, which is, of course, it's all biased towards what I do in the area and with work, as I'll get into. Second, I'm continuing to develop this, annoyingly contrarian case that actually technology is hard. So I want to explore that idea some more. And then, I was thinking it would be fun to talk about, let's call it pre-doom and dealing with that. Because I think that's kind of a psychological topic that comes up a lot when people are trying to improve how they're doing things. So first of all, digital transformation. What do I mean when I say that? Well, as I said in the introduction to my little booklet, Monolithic Transformation, which you can get for free if you go to Coté.pizza, and, you have to lead gen yourself there. Listen, if you want to email me, I'll send you a PDF for free, which is fine. I'm just CoteM@VMware.com. I don't know why I'm CoteM. I know where those letters come from. I'm not sure what email policy you have that arrives at a name like CodeM. Like, it seems like you would just ask people what email address they wanted and allow them to come up with their own. I don't know. But, it is kind of, at this point, like an odd phrase. It's odd in the sense that it's like not precise and means lots of different things. Kind of like, an environmentalist or, a conservationist or whatever, big D, little d democracy or whatever. It requires a lot of explanation. Now, on the other hand, it is a piece of jargon, and so it can mean contradictorily, not so much a precise thing as like a type of signaling and a collection of stuff. It can mean something kind of precise as thus, right? So when I use the phrase, obviously digital transformation is sort of like something driven by IT, right? Something driven by computers and software. And I think usually the ambition is for it to be a company scope. Today, my waving item is going to be this coffee cup, as you can see, which I guess is good. Maybe I'll turn the lights up a little bit. I messed around with my lighting. Maybe I'll show you this at the end if I remember. I did a little green screen nonsense. There we go. Look at that. Let me write end green screen. For some reason, I need to get my son more involved, but my other daughter has become the subject of the end of lots of these videos. I guess fried rice is not a daughter of mine. So anyways, I think at its base, when we think about digital transformation, I think it's fun to think about what would analog transformation be, right? And so that's kind of the first idea, is that basically we're trying to figure out how to run our business better whatever better may be. We could take more of a dimming approach and say we're looking to achieve our goals and also pursue quality. And again, his idea of quality is a very confusing word nowadays. Quality is basically like product market fit, right? That you've got an efficient system that's meeting customer demand or achieving whatever goals you have, right? Now, knowing what your goals are and defining them, boy, that's a whole other conversation to get around to. That's the thing when you think about organizational change and change management is basically you're constantly peeling back to the fact that like most organizations are not doing much and they're not being very deliberate. And instead what they're doing is optimizing on a system they previously came up with instead of sort of discovering new, better ways to do things. And I think that's, again, we're not again, but it brings us back into the idea of digital transformation, which is, as an organization, we're looking to be more adaptive and change and come up with new, better ways of doing things. We can be efficient as well, right? Where efficiency means not only doing something cheaper, but it could be doing it faster, doing it with higher quality or whatnot. But I think at core, when we're starting with digital transformation, there's two things that we mean that split off, and I'm going to kind of reduce one of them. One is just, and I don't mean this in, I guess there's three. I don't mean it in a dismissive way, but one of them is just sort of like what we used to call the paperless office, right? And if you've ever filled out a form that's a piece of paper, or even to an extent like done it online in a PDF, you've got like a very paperful manual way of doing things. And often, as more advanced apps will show you, that process is not the best when you can digitize it, right? So even if you've got the ability to digitally sign something, right? That's almost the perfect example that we've scanned in a PDF for like a mortgage or whatever. You go through and it's really nice if you use one of these online services like DocuSign or others. And it's almost the ease by which you use it makes fun of it, because what happens is you open up this 300-page document and you need to initial and sign several places. And what you do is you click to the next one and it just zooms you to the next one to click, and it puts your initial in there. You don't even have to input your own signature. It can just make one up for you. Now, what it's not doing is like making sure you've actually achieved the goal of reading all of the fine print so that should some problem come up, you have a common understanding that you can work from. Like no one's going to read all that stuff. So if something goes wrong, you're going to have a bunch of litigation arguing over the fact that it was like an absurd thing and a bunch of stuff like that. But then also that you just can make up your own signature. It's just hilarious, right? Like now the I guess in contrast there, like the digital side of it is that on the back end of that, while we might have this absurd UI of pretending like we're scrolling through a piece of paper and signing it, what you are doing is, someone has authenticated that it's you to the best of their ability because you've got this special link or password. And what you're going through is acknowledging that you have read and understood, although obviously you have done neither with a gigantic document. But whatever, you're doing the dance of legality. But you're going through and verifying that you are the person who has clicked on this thing, which is, it's implied, even though it's completely bunk, that you have read and understand it and you agree to the terms of it. Oftentimes what you're agreeing to is just like, I need this thing this person is giving me and whatever. But so it is tracking that and verifying it, which arguably is a lot better than verifying in a manual way, where you bring two forms of ID and you're trusting in the person to verify it. Maybe you got a notary. Now, a notary is an interesting way of thinking about verification as well, but I'm digging into a trench of distractions here. So if you think about a paperless thing, it's really just taking that, and it would be, I guess you've gone paperless because you put that PDF in there, but there's another way where you might think about what is a better way to kind of like just do that mortgage thing. And I'm not sure people have really come up with that yet. But there probably is a much better way of going through, like signing up for an insurance policy or a mortgage or all kinds of things like this. I guess one version might be, and this is a little bit on the edge, like I'm supposed to go, we'll see if I actually do this, but I'm supposed to go read my water meter to see how much water we've been using this quarter, and then enter it into a web page somewhere for the water provider here in Amsterdam. And that way they can kind of adjust the money that we have. Now, what's confounding after all these years is they still don't just know that on an hourly, if not minutely basis. But I suppose that's an infrastructure problem. On the other hand, like the ground here is all sand. and people just pull up bricks all the time and just put stuff down there. So it seems like you could install those devices, but maybe it's not cost efficient. So that's, another example of doing things in a paperless way. Now, on the back end, I think there's a tremendous amount more things where you have, you've got people approving mortgage applications and, more quickly doing research and bringing things together. But, that's one area of digitalness is just think about all the analog processes or the kind of skeuomorphic. And skeuomorphic is basically like an analog process is represented on your screen in software, right? Like when the first iPhone came out, there's brushed metal on it and like wood, and it looks like pages. So it's skeuomorphic in the sense that like you're just totally making up this UI that doesn't actually need to exist just because you're comfortable with it, right? Which is fine as well. And then I think there's a second thing that digital transformation means, which is just a catch-all. And it's basically, and this is the part that I think is kind of annoying, is it's basically just things like using computers, right? So it's changing the way that people can work from home or changing the way desktops are used. Just all sorts of stuff like that, which I think is kind of inflating the term, but that's where things get to be, kind of useless. But I think, so, I thought of another example, the first thing, right, of you could look, I was reading a story about using blockchain stuff in shipping, right, down in Rotterdam. Some company did this trialing in Antwerp of essentially there's a problem. There's a step that happens where a piece of cargo comes to a port, a truck has to come pick it up. That truck has to verify that it's the one that can get that cargo, right? And then you also have to log, like, this cargo came here. We authorized this cargo to change hands. The cargo did change hands. Now this trucker has the cargo, and then they pass it on to the next person, right? And from what I was reading, like originally this is just done with a PIN. So I guess you could call that one-factor verification. Someone's given a 4 to 16 to 24, I don't know how long characters number, and they tap it in. And that means because they know that password, let me get Sophie back here. Because they know that password, it means they're the ones who are authorized to do that, and it logs and everything. But instead, I don't really understand how blockchain works. I mean, I've read all this stuff, but I don't understand it deep enough to really know what's going on. But, because basically what you're doing with blockchain is you have, I think you would say, I guess you could have one, but it wouldn't make sense. You need at least two parties who basically, it's like a notary, are verifying the data in your little block, or they're verifying that something happened, right? So you could say, like, these two parties have verified that this person should get the piece of crate, and these other two parties or more have verified they received the crate, so forth and so on. So you have a ledger, a verified and sort of almost impossible to falsify chain of custody of records. So that would be another example, I think, of kind of that digital transformation of going from, I was going to say monologue, that's what I'm doing, analog to digital, which I think is more advanced than just sort of like a paperless thing. Now, the third thing, and this is also kind of overblowing the term, but I think increasingly when you see people like us in VMware Tanzu, now I said VMware, so as you know, I can now just say Tanzu, but remember, originally it was VMware Tanzu. I just can drop that according to the brand. So what I think this is looking for is, and I used to kind of deride this, if that's the right word, or make fun of it, but it's essentially saying, as a analog company, how can I do whatever it is that these tech companies are doing? And what are these tech companies doing? Tech companies, whether they're software vendors like us at VMware, or even your Facebooks or your Zillows, or I don't know, there's a company here in Amsterdam called Picnic, which delivers groceries, and they're all online. I guess you would say Amazon obviously is a tech company, kind of proves the point. But what they're doing is they're figuring out how to use software that they have made, not just off-the-shelf ERP software, but they're getting really good at software in the same way that a manufacturer gets really good at building a factory or managing their supply chain. I wonder, we'll have to see if this is, let me listen to myself here to see if what my daughter's contributing. Pretty good. Yeah. Some insights there if you speak the appropriate language. So what you're doing is you're trying to figure out how these tech companies think, right? And how they use software as their factory. Now, the whole meta layer on that, right? Like if you listen to enough or read enough like management theory, right? Like I'm still going through the new economy thing by Deming, right? Like a lot of what we focus on when it comes to running companies is what they're actually doing, the products that they make, the way they're being competitive, you know, the old classic Netflix versus Blockbuster thing, right? But what we're not always focusing on, I think, is the real heart of the matter, which is how is the company learning and discovering what to do? How is it evolving and managing and the tactics that it's putting out there, right? The, as they say, on the ground stuff that's happening. All those day-to-day, week-by-week decisions that are being made. But I think equally importantly, thinking about the system that they're building and how they operate. And I think that's the type of digital transformation I'm more interested in, is that if you're switching your company over to act like that, to act in a digital way, act like a tech company. I wish there was a better name than tech company because, you know, the specter of a tech company nowadays is like big social media things that are supported by ads, which I think is a very small sliver of what tech companies are. And also it gives you there's an avenue to get obsessed with valuation and, you know, share price and stuff like that. But how do these companies think, right? So I think there's three interesting things for how they think, which I think very quickly goes down to product management, agile software development, and then, you know, very self-serving for us in Tanzu land, some infrastructure that you need to enable all of that. So first of all, what these organizations are doing is they're typically not delivering to a set of static understood requirements, right? So if you think about the way that a lot of analog businesses work, right? Like you're manufacturing something to spec, right? It's we're going to make 500,000 units of this thing over and over again, and we're going to make it this one way. Now, you know, lean manufacturing has gotten really good about perfecting this and constantly studying it, which is a lot of where we start to go, is that in the construction of these 500,000 units, you can constantly study and optimize how things are being made, right? Especially when it comes to planning and supply chain. But I think the second thing, as I was mentioning, is more of because you're running your business through software, right? What that means is that you have a lot more malleability and agility that you can use. So you can decide at any given time if software, your apps or your UIs, is the primary way that you interact with your customers. You can decide to change what that interaction is, right? So instead of, what's an example? Instead of just transferring money by, that's a bad example, but I'll see if I think of one as I'm talking. Well, I know. Here's an example from a very simple example from Orange, a French telco that we work with. So they have a way of presenting bills. They had a way of presenting bills to kind of like small shop owners. And what they would do is you would go into their UI.
Obviously, you click on it easily. You see last bill, next bill, and a notification about, am I above? Do I have to top up or whatever? Seems simple, but for example, as an anecdote, I thought, that's a good example, that he would like to see his 5 latest bill. So we asked the customer, and he said, no, I just want my last bill. Why? It's because it's easy then to send the last bill to my accountant, as it is as that through the phone.
This interaction of seeing what your bills is one of the primary interactions that a small business owner is going to have with you, because they want to make sure that their bill is paid. And in this case, they're also, if you think about delivery drivers, they're also giving out mobile phones to people, and they want to see if there's overages on data usage, because that's going to be an expense that's going to come in and be an unexpected expense. And then if you're running a shop in retail, your margins are probably very thin. So if all of a sudden, you know, basically, and you also probably don't pay yourself a salary, you get paid basically on like the profit that you have. I don't know, you probably do pay yourself a salary, but whatever. And so if your employees have data overages at the end of the month that you're suddenly surprised by that, like you're going to find out like it's going to reduce your income, right? So, in kind of analyzing these situations, right, Orange was able to change the way it was interacting with their customers, right, to change their software around, and indeed actually deliver on a new type of service, if you will, which is more like predicting when the owner was going to lose money at the end of the month. That was unexpected. And so they changed their software around to make it easier to figure this out, to make it easier to see if they had paid their bill, so they wouldn't get, a late fine, right? And, this is different than manufacturing three-dimensional things. It's more of a service delivered thing. But that ability to explore and discover a new way of working with your customer that's more efficient, that has that kind of dimming quality, right? Delivering something that's actually useful to the customer. I think that's a good small example of what you're going for when you do this third type of digital transformation, when you think like a tech company, right? Now, even though it's in advertising and, also like in kind of manipulating people's minds, as we found, digital companies in the advertising space, they do similar tests, right? They're constantly studying when you go look at your activity stream, or you want to look at photos, or you search for things. They're constantly studying that interaction between the business and the customer. And they're trying to find a better way to get the customer to look at their stuff more, to click on more ads, to surface search results better. So in the same way that Orange was trying to find a better way to kind of have that interaction with their customer through software, those tech companies are trying to do that. And if you look at, big successful retailers, they do that. Like this morning, I got a delivery of groceries from Albert Heijn. And, there's two things that are, one, you can order groceries online. So that's fantastic, right? That's a different way of interacting with your customer. It's sort of as they say, omni-channel retail. And it reminded me, I remember there was a British grocery store chain I was talking with a while ago. And they said that they had discovered when it came to online ordering, they discovered this whole other side market. I don't know if it's a gray market, where you could buy delivery slots. So getting your groceries delivered sooner is a valuable service. And someone had actually written a service, some software that would allow you to kind of game that system, and you could pay a premium to have more control over when things were delivered. So in finding this, the English grocery store, they added that feature into the grocery buying, and it was another revenue stream for them, for sure. But it's also let them discover something that was valuable to their customers and change the way they interact with their customers. But it was through that curious learning nature and also having the ability to change the software quickly that allowed for that. So what I was describing there, right, I use all these words like dimming quality and product market fit and innovation. But I think what it is treating this interaction you have with your customer as your product, right? Like that's the ongoing thing that you're providing. One of the components of it, in addition to whatever the product may be, right? Like, as I'm always joking, like when we, we're from the States, so we like Papa John's pizza. So we order that over here every now and then. I'm sure it makes the Italian pizza guys at the end of the street really frustrated. Whenever I go throw away the boxes, I try to hide them because the trash cans are right across the street. And I want to make sure they don't see that because they're so nice. They wave at me when I pass by all the time. I don't want them to think, I like their pizza, but I like the other stuff too. Anyways, you can order pizza from there. But when it does come, there's pizza in the box, not software. So you might actually have you actually need to have a real product there. But the way you interact with them, they discover new things you can do through the app, and it's actually kind of delightful. It has these little animations of pepperoni going on the pizza, things like that. I actually haven't ordered from there in a long time. But they're constantly, thinking about how do we change this interface with our customers to make the overall experience of ordering better. And that's really thinking about the entire system of your business, right? Not just making the pizza good, not just making the way you run the kitchen efficient, not just making the logistics of delivering cheese efficient, not just making hiring people efficient and controlling the costs of what you pay them, I guess, or getting the pizza to the door, but thinking about that last mile, so to speak, to dealing with the customer, which is the software you're using to work with them. Oh, there we go. She's about to drop it, but I got it. But also, thinking about that as maybe one of the more important, malleable things that you can work with. So that's the focus that I tend to have when I'm talking about digital transformation. And to put it in very simple terms, it means running your business better by getting better at software, at writing your own custom written software and product managing it, which very quickly, what that means to me is getting us into this realm, for lack of a better phrase, of product management. Now, product management over the past, what year is this, 2020? 20 years or so has evolved from sort of project management and requirements management. Now, back when I was learning to be a programmer, back in the 90s, the height of how software was done, in my opinion, was represented in the rational rows process. Now, this process was a way to specify pretty much everything that a piece of software wanted to do, to estimate the budgeting and costs, and also manage the multi-phase delivery of that software. And I don't really know the history of it, but I would imagine, what results are like huge documents and a huge process around the process, right? So if you look up, what would they call it, RUP and the associated things, there's a description of all the documents that you have and the committees that run those documents and the handoffs and the way that you approve them. And I have to imagine when it comes to large projects, when we were building out what we call legacy software nowadays, that a lot of it was over budget, over time, and underspecified. There was almost this lack of trust that people could go off and implement these things. And so we had this trust in documentation and verification and this kind of tops-down way of doing things, and also documenting what went wrong so we could go investigate it. And I think that's when you end up with these big, gigantic processes that are multi-stage with big documents and things like that. Well, specifying those requirements and then also even saying, what the software should look like and how to verify it and all that, that has evolved over time to, you don't really have that. Instead, you set what your goals are, right? I don't know, sell more pizza, or, have better quality of improving loan, or of loan approvals that you have, or reduce, I think I referenced this with BT stuff a couple episodes ago, but reduce the time it takes for a customer to add a new, bundle, a new set of channels to their cable bundle. So you more, with your software, you have these goals in mind. You have the goals of how you want the business to function. And then the second thing that you want to do is you want to be able to try out new things, to experiment with how to achieve those goals. And not only experiment with how to achieve them, but actively discover how you're going to do that, right? So you're not going to, I need to actively discover how to get her not to drop her toy so much. But you're not really going to focus on, this is exactly what we want the software to look like because we know what it needs to be and deliver it. Instead, you're going to start moving sooner and put in an exploratory way of discovering what the user needs are. So with that Orange case, they didn't really know that ahead of time, that was what end users wanted. They actually had to study that and experiment, right? Come up with a theory of how to do it. And so product management, there's all sorts of technical ways of doing it. Well, there's not really all sorts. There's pretty much one thing. And that is you have a product manager who knows the business well, who spends a lot of time talking with customers or end users and understanding that business, the interactions that go on. And then what the product manager really does is ultimately it's almost this, the surgeon theory of development, the great person of history, to degender it. But they're the ones who are responsible for saying, what features are we going to put in? It still can be a requirement. You can wrap it up in a story or whatever. All of that stuff is just mind hacking and an orientation of how you think about stuff. But what features are we going to put into the software this time? And how are we going to test out if it's valid or not? And then they can interpret like if it worked or not. If the software that we did was valuable and viable for the business. So they're the ones who are really programming the business, if you think about it, programming the business based on what's put in the software. Now, commonly, that sort of ordered list of features will be called a backlog, which is, I forget if that comes from XP or Scrum, but you'll hear people talk about backlogs all the time. And what I would do is I would think about a backlog as the experiments that we are going to run by putting features in the software. I guess you could take away features too, but by changing the software and therefore changing the way that the business interacts with the customer and therefore changing the way the business operates. So the backlog really is the evolution of your business, the way you're going along and discovering things. Now, what's implied in there, just to kind of quickly wrap it up, is that you have developers who are writing software and you're going to be deploying that software on a feedback cycle. Again, I recommend, well, not again, but I always recommend you need to get to a week. Like 2 weeks is okay, but like you should really be pressing for a week, if not multiple times a week. And you might even, like here in the Netherlands, there's Booking.com, which is famous for doing thousands, if not tens of thousands of experiments a week, which is a good extreme explanation of the types of changings that they're doing. I mean, they have to automate it, and I have to imagine it's down to like shades of color that they have for drop shadows on buttons, or just like the pixel placement of buttons and things like that. Now, obviously, there might be more finer grained things like, whenever someone is renting a car, we should put that offer for them to buy cheap insurance, car insurance at this place in the workflow versus some other place in the workflow, right? Like that. I don't know if you could automate that so much, but anyways, you want to put in place a process and a stack of technology that really allows you to run those experiments. And then that's where the infrastructure comes into play, right? Speaking of infrastructure, let me get the little toy again. There's another toy, a ball. I'll bring that one over. So, and I think this is where this cascading, paying attention to what the end user wants, the customer, whatever, really comes into play. Is underneath the development team is a platform, a set of infrastructure run by people, right? You can call them platform operations, platform engineers. I don't care if you call them DevOps people or SRE people. Like, it doesn't really matter. Call them whatever you want. But they are the ones who are thinking about that development team, about the goals the developers have and how they are going to use software, the platform people, to help them achieve those goals. Now, again, the goals of the software development people are to go to put new features in as determined by the backlog and see if it works, right? And then constantly be evolving that business. Now, there are other people who have goals like, we would like our data not to be hacked. We'd like people not to steal our stuff. We have government regulations that we need to comply to. And those are boring, but all part of the business as well, and also that backlog that you're doing. But the development team, they don't want to care about that stuff, as evidenced by them not caring about that stuff and it being a hassle for people. So that platform team equally is focusing on, all right, how can we satisfy those needs as easily as possible for the end users? I mean, back to the pizza thing. I'm sure over at Papa John's, if they could just read my mind, if I'd authorize that, and figure out when we wanted to order pizza and they could immediately ship that pizza, they would enjoy doing that, right? They don't really probably take pleasure in us having to use their app and us taking the time to do it and figure out what we want to do, like as quickly as they can just realize that they need to ship a pizza to us. And I guess they don't ship it, but get a pizza to us and have us pay for it. They want that to be as quick and seamless as possible, which I do as well, right? So really, the platform people, I guess to put it one way, their job is to get as close to reading the minds of the developers and their other stakeholders as possible and automating that stuff for them. So obviously, if you were using the Tanzu stack, whether it be Kubernetes or the Tanzu application server, our platform is a service based on Cloud Foundry, tightly integrated with Spring. You might have observability. I've got 15 minutes till this meeting. And all sorts of other things. You could almost read the mind of developers. And by almost, I mean not at all. But you would be able to automate a lot of these things better, as our countless customers show. If I was really quick, I'd have our slide of astounding figures. I think I already showed that to you on Friday, going through the presentation that I have. So that's what I mean when I talk about digital transformation. It's essentially, if I'm a business, I first realize, or I first believe, that software is the primary way I interact with my customers. It's the primary way I transact business or users, internal or external facing. And the way that I'm going to get better at software, which means I'll get better at that interaction, better at working with customers. I'll get that dimming quality, better at calibrating what they want. I need to put a very deliberative, disciplined, let's call it an innovation process, a process of discovery and learning that I can always prioritize my backlog, put things in there that help me figure out how to run the business better. And then I need the whole organization and stack of software, of infrastructure that supports that. And now, as always with my stuff, which I'll save for another time, many more times, there's all sorts of what they call cultural or process changes, mindset changes that you go to as well, which all fall out from this idea of paying attention to the whole system. Once you've identified those goals, those operational goals that I've outlined, you have to go revisit the way your organization is set up, the way you think about your business, the way you do everything, and see if they're aligned, which is to say, if they are best supporting, if they're even more than neutral, but they're helping you accomplish those goals that you have as much as possible. So now let me cover the last two little bits. One is just some further development of this idea. I think this is about, forever in the tech world, but definitely when did I'd say around 2014 or 2015, 2016, this phrase came out that, the technology is not hard. It's the people and the process that's hard. And I think that is a little like fun and flippant and fanciful, but really both of them are hard. Really both of them are very hard. And I've been thinking this a lot recently because, I read a lot of, reports about what's happening out in the field from our, I forget what we call them, sales engineers and other people like that. And then I also read the competitive reports that we get about, what's going on the competitive landscape. And then I read the endless books and write-ups about how to, put microservices in place. Or, Kent Beck had a very small Kent Beckian thing recently that the coupling, discovering your coupling is a problem. That's really short shrift to that. But we sort of like to think technology is easy, and yet there are endless problems, or I should say there are endless explanations of how to do things, endless tutorials, endless videos and books, and a severe lack of documentation, and endlessly talking about a lack of skills or the difficulty of doing things. Or joking about YAML files. I mean, I think that the technology is genuinely difficult, right? It's hard. It's hard to figure out how to get security settings correctly. It's hard to figure out how to get your infrastructure set up to your paths. It's hard to figure out how to get UIs to do things correctly. If you imagine back to that booking thing, if you wanted to run tens of thousands of tests a week, that would be hard to figure out too. How do you do that? How do you scale things, right? So, I mean, I think it's worth considering a little bit that the technology is difficult, right? And we need to set our expectations correctly that there's going to be a lot of work to make it possible. Now, you could argue that when it comes to things like security and compliance, the reason it's difficult is because, people need to have the will to do the thing that is stopping it, right? Whether it's on the product side, someone needs to implement something that they've decided not to, or on the policy side, someone needs to change the policy that they had. But I don't know. That's that argument seems to again, it gets to the idea that it's going to be easy to get the technology up and running and easy to understand it and easy to know how to control and manage it, on and on. And also, I think changing the way an organization works is hard, right? If you think about people and their ideas and how they function as a thought technology, that technology is also hard and difficult. But don't get hung up on both of them being or the technology part being easy, because it's not. Now, the last one, I was thinking, I've got a couple of meetings today. That's why I was doing this early. And I have this, there's a phrase, catastrophizing. And there's another phrase, I was thinking it's called pre-dread. And I've noticed this pattern in my work that when I have, as you may know if you've been following along at home, I've got an EBC coming up this week. And I spend so much time focusing on that 30, 45 minutes of delivery. I've got another a fun event, which I've done enough of that I'm not worried about it, on Wednesday night. But oftentimes I have a new type of talk or event. And my mind will be so distracted with worrying about my performance there or things that could go bad that it's, I don't know what the description is, but it's effectively hard to focus on doing other things. And so I'll find that leading up to that, I'm not really able, I'm trying to find something that would be not, here, this is something novel for her to play with that isn't too terrible. Just a little comb. But it really like clouds up my brain for some reason, and I don't focus on doing other things. So I might have like a whole week before some presentation I need to give, and I might only need to do, this would be kind of extreme, but like, let's say 6 hours of work on that presentation. And instead of just doing that 6 hours of work and kind of bounding my mind to it, I let worrying about it and thinking about it kind of infect the rest of my work time, and I don't use the rest of that time effectively to do other things. And then a bunch of stuff mounts up and I get stressed out about it, and I don't really know what's going on with that. But it's something I've recently realized that I do, and I'm always trying to combat it. It's kind of pre-dread, I think. Now, I think one of the things that people try to tell you, this is like, you know, when it comes to self-help advice, the thing I always find is like, we sort of know what it is we're supposed to do. We know the end state, but changing your behavior and your mindset to get there over time is more of the playbook that I'm interested in, right? Like I need the coach who's kind of walking me through it, whatever. But the question becomes like, I mean, obviously you need to just not think about it until you need to. And you could even assume that things will go well. You could even kind of belittle your worrying about it by saying like, it's never really that big of a deal. Like even in the worst case scenario, if things go terrible, is anything of consequence going to happen, right? And so you can go through all those things, but I don't know. It's really hard to like convince yourself to do that. So I think especially when it comes to transforming how an organization works and worrying about reprogramming your culture, that's probably something to kind of look out for, right? Because I think once someone gets in their mind that there's a big stressful thing ahead of them and they build up fear around it, it's really hard to change that fear and remove it. I mean, you might even think a way of incrementally pacing things out or just kind of addressing what those fears are and kind of talking through the ways that they won't be a big deal. I don't know. I don't have an answer to it, but it's an issue that I've been worrying about a lot recently. Now, let me bring up my standard closing here, because I'm going to use one of the older things that I have here. Sorry, I haven't prepared the notes ahead of time. I'm a little out of sync, but hey, that's fine. Let me bring this up. One head screen. Now, if you're interested in more of this kind of stuff, I don't know if it's this kind of stuff, but you know what you should do? How come I can't zoom in on this? Is there's a couple of things you can do if you want to get into the Tanzu land more. And that is one, so if you're interested in Kubernetes and starting to think about it, the infrastructure layer, how you can support out, doing that digital transformation, chances are you're going to be doing something with Kubernetes. And now if you have vSphere, I forget the exact version, vSphere 7 point, the right version or whatever, maybe even 0.0. I don't know. I don't deal in that kind of stuff. But you have Kubernetes built right into it, so you can start to experiment with use it. I would recommend that you get some developers, a product team, and say like, hey, I want to try out using this Kubernetes thing. What do you need? Let's use an application that's a real business-facing one, maybe a store locator app. That's a very popular, excellent one to start learning how to do something. And you can just sort of turn that on. And if you want to know how to do a lot of that, you go to kubeacademy.com. We've got a lot of great free coursework that's always being added to. You can kind of learn what Kubernetes is, how to administer it, how to think through it. And of course, you can always call us up and, try to get some help from us. We'll try to sell you something, but isn't that life? Aren't you trying to sell someone something? But you should check that out. Lots of good learning to have in there, and you can just get it up and running. Now, on the developer side, we've got a growing set of talking about what software development looks like. If you go to tanzu.vmware.com/developer, as you can see there, I think we're working on getting a better URL. If we don't get one, I'll just make one, and it'll be fun. Maybe it should be tanzu.limo or tanzu.plumbing. That'd be nice. But you should go check that out. We're going to bring a whole lot of Agile Pivotal Labs knowledge into there at some point, which will be nice. And then finally, if you want a real hands-on sort of thing, I don't know, more in depth, you should schedule what we call a discovery workshop. It can be an hour, half a day, whatever. But if you go to Coté.pizza, there's a little form that you can fill out. And also, if you go to Coté.pizza, you can get the free books that I mentioned and all sorts of other things. So also, you can see the archives of this. You can find, I'll upload this to YouTube. We archive them there, but just go to tanzu.tv and scroll down to where the stuff is. And we've got all sorts of other shows there that broadcast later in the day or US time. You should check those out. So finally, if you've got any questions or feedback, I'm always interested in hearing them. You can DM me on Twitter. You can leave a comment somewhere. I don't know. I'll see if I notice it. Or you can email me at that mysterious email address, Codem. I don't know who this Codem is. I'm not too familiar with them, but every time, for some reason, I get Codem's email. And that's a way that you can email to me, Cotem, Codem. Or is it Codem? I forget how letters work in English. But if you got any questions or things you're interested in, that's good. And then also, I'm really interested in talking with people in Europe on this. That's why I broadcast at 11 a.m., Amsterdam time. So if you're one of my coworkers or if you're someone who's interested in these kind of topics, especially if you're at an organization figuring out digital transformation, it'd be great. Come on here. You can be sitting here virtually. You can chew on my wooden brush. I'll bring a Sophie as well. But it'd be good to talk to you. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.